October 14th, 1990. A quiet suburb outside Columbus, Ohio. 8-year-old Thomas Cross was playing in his front yard while his mother prepared dinner inside. 45 minutes later, she stepped onto the porch to call him in for supper. The yard was empty. His red bicycle lay tipped over on the dry dirt, one wheel still spinning. August 3rd, 2026. A man walked into a Seattle police station. He wore a worn flannel shirt and carried nothing but a wallet. He approached the desk sergeant with trembling hands and slid a driver's license across the counter. The name read Mark Evans. The sergeant looked at the photo, then at the man. They matched. The man spoke. His voice cracked. "My real name is Thomas Cross. I vanished in 1990 and I need protection. If you're new here, consider subscribing. We document the most extraordinary missing persons cases ever solved. This story is one of the strangest you'll ever hear." The sergeant stared at him. He looked at the license again. He looked at the man's face, older now, aged, haunted. The photo on the ID showed a man who had lived a hard life. But the bone structure, the eyes, the shape of the jaw, they matched the age-progressed image the FBI had circulated 30 years ago. Thomas Cross, the sergeant repeated. "The missing child from Ohio?" The man nodded. His eyes were wet. "I was 8 years old when my father took me. He told me my mother abandoned me. He told me if I ever left, the police would arrest me. I believed him until 2 weeks ago." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a folded newspaper clipping. He placed it on the counter. The yellowed paper showed a photograph of a smiling boy with a missing poster above it. "Ohio boy vanished. Police suspect abduction." The date was October 16th, 1990. "He's dead now," Thomas said quietly. "My father, he died in the cabin. After he was gone, I found these. All of them, stuffed in a metal box under the floor." He emptied his pocket onto the desk. A dozen clippings, all from 1990 and 1991, all showing the same face, all asking for information about a boy who had simply vanished from his front yard. The sergeant called his supervisor. 2 hours later, FBI agents arrived. They took Thomas's DNA and sent it to the lab with a priority flag. They questioned him for 6 straight hours. He told them everything. The boy who disappeared on October 14th, 1990, was not taken by a stranger. He was taken by his own father, a man who had lost custody for violent behavior, a man who would spend the next 36 years controlling his son through fear and lies in a remote cabin in Alaska, isolated, untraceable, hidden from the world. The DNA results came back 24 hours later. 100% match. Thomas Cross was alive. The news broke at midnight. Investigators rushed to locate his mother, who still lived in that same Ohio house, still kept that same red bicycle in her garage, still left a light on every night. She was 71 years old and had never given up hope. We need to understand what happened in 1990. We need to understand how a child can be stolen from his own yard and disappear for 36 years. October 14th, 1990 began like any other Sunday in the Cross household. Diana Cross was 35 years old, divorced, and raising her only son alone. Her ex-husband, Richard Cross, had been out of the picture for 2 years. The court had terminated his visitation rights after an incident involving Thomas that left the boy with bruises on his arms and a fear of his own father. Diana married Richard in 1980. For the first 5 years, she thought she had found a good man. He worked at the local steel plant, came home on time, and seemed to love Thomas. But the drinking started, and so did the violence. By 1988, Diana had filed for divorce. A judge granted full custody to Diana and restricted Richard to supervised visits only. Those visits stopped entirely when Richard showed up intoxicated to his court-ordered supervision session. The judge terminated all visitation rights. Richard Cross disappeared from their lives. On that Sunday in October, Thomas played outside with his toy trucks, while Diana made meatloaf in the kitchen. She checked on him through the window every few minutes. At 5:15 p.m., she saw him riding his red bicycle in a circle near the driveway. At 5:45 p.m., she called out for him to come inside. No answer. She stepped onto the porch. The bicycle lay on its side, wheels still turning. A tiny blue truck sat in the dust, abandoned mid-play. The yard was silent. "Thomas!" she called. "Thomas, dinner's ready!" Nothing. She ran to the street. She called his name over and over. The neighborhood was quiet. No cars, no people. A dog barked somewhere in the distance. Diana Cross called 911 at 5:57 p.m. The operator asked her to stay calm and describe what happened. "My son is gone," Diana said. "He was just in the yard. I turned my back for a few minutes. His bike is on the ground. Please send someone, please." The first sheriff's deputy arrived at 6:12 p.m. Deputy Mark Hollis was a 22-year veteran of the Franklin County Sheriff's Department. He had responded to missing children calls before. He knew the first hours were the most critical. Hollis questioned Diana. He walked the perimeter of the yard. He knelt beside the red bicycle. The chain was still warm. Thomas had been there moments before he vanished. There were no footprints leading away from the yard. No tire tracks. No sign of struggle. "Ma'am," Hollis said, "I need to ask you something. Is there any chance your husband took him?" Diana's face went pale. "Richard. He hasn't been around in 2 years. The court took away his visitation. He wouldn't do this." "Did he ever threaten you? Threaten to take Thomas?" Diana hesitated. She remembered the night Richard had shown up at the house, drunk, pounding on the door. He had shouted through the wood, "You'll never keep him from me. I'll get him back. You'll see." But she had told herself he was just angry, just drunk, just a man who couldn't accept the divorce. "Maybe," she said. "I don't know. I don't think so. He's been gone a long time." By 7:30 p.m., 20 officers were searching the surrounding woods, fields, and neighboring streets. Search dogs were brought in by 9:00 p.m. The K9 units tracked a scent from the front yard to the tree line, where it stopped cold. There was no further trail. The FBI was contacted the next morning. The case was classified as a stranger abduction. Investigators interviewed every neighbor within a 2-mile radius. Nobody saw anything. Nobody heard anything. A boy on a bicycle simply vanished from his front lawn. Margaret Hanson lived 3 doors down from the Cross house. She was 73 years old and spent most of her afternoons on her porch. She remembered seeing Thomas that Sunday afternoon. He was riding his bike in circles, she told investigators. "I watched him for maybe 10 minutes. He looked happy, just a normal little boy. I went inside to make a cup of tea, and when I came back out, he was gone. I thought his mother had called him in. I didn't think anything of it until the police showed up." Margaret Hanson never forgave herself. She spent the next 36 years replaying that afternoon in her mind. She should have stayed outside. She should have kept watching. She should have noticed something. "Everyone in that neighborhood wondered what they could have done differently," she said years later. "We all felt responsible. A child vanished in broad daylight, and none of us saw a thing." Diana Cross sat in her living room and watched the news coverage. She gave interview after interview, pleading for her son's return. She described Thomas's voice, his laugh, his love for blueberry pancakes. She held up his school photograph and begged the person who took him to bring him home. For months, the investigation churned. Every tip led nowhere. Every suspect checked out. The red bicycle stayed in the evidence locker. The age-progressed images were released. The case went cold. The Franklin County Sheriff's Department officially classified the investigation as inactive in 1995. 5 years without a single lead. Diana Cross never accepted it. She kept Thomas's room exactly as it was, the twin bed with the dinosaur sheets, the stack of picture books, the jar of marbles on the nightstand. She attended every vigil. She spoke at every missing persons event. She wrote letters to the governor, to the FBI director, to anyone who would listen. And she never sold the house. "Why would I leave?" she told a reporter in 2005. "This is where he knows to come home. If I leave, he won't find me." In the spring of 1991, a tip came into the sheriff's department. A woman in Cleveland reported seeing a boy who looked like Thomas at a gas station. She described a man who matched Richard Cross's description. The FBI followed up. They interviewed the station attendant, reviewed security footage, and found nothing. The lead went dead. In 1993, a similar report came from Indiana. A couple at a rest stop saw a man traveling with a young boy who looked frightened. The boy was wearing glasses. Thomas did not wear glasses. The FBI investigated anyway. The man turned out to be a grandfather traveling with his grandson. Another dead end. By 1995, the case had generated nearly 300 tips. Every single one was exhausted. Every lead led to nothing. Richard Cross was interviewed in the early days of the investigation. He told detectives he had been fishing in Lake Erie on the day Thomas disappeared. He produced receipts from a bait shop. He seemed cooperative, but indifferent. He did not attend any vigils. He gave no interviews to the press. He simply faded from view. Investigators followed up on Richard's alibi. The bait shop confirmed he was there in the afternoon. But the timeline left room for travel. A 3-hour drive from Columbus to the lake and back. There was a gap. Nobody could account for Richard Cross's whereabouts between 2:00 p.m. and 6:00 p.m. on October 14, 1990. Detective Carl Benson was assigned to the case in 1992. He was a meticulous investigator who spent thousands of hours reviewing witness statements and physical evidence. He was convinced Richard Cross was involved, but he could not prove it. Everything pointed at the father, Benson later recalled. The custody battle, the violence, the threats. But we couldn't make the pieces fit. He had a solid alibi for part of the day, and there was no evidence tying him to the abduction. We interviewed him 3 times, and every time he was calm and collected. He answered every question. He never slipped up. Benson requested a warrant to search Richard's property in 1993. The judge denied it. There was no probable cause. Richard Cross was a man with a clean record who had cooperated with the investigation. He had given investigators permission to search his truck. They found nothing. That was the moment I knew the case was going cold, Benson said. We had a suspect, but we couldn't touch him. And then he moved out of state, and the trail went cold with him. Richard Cross relocated to Washington State in 1993. He told investigators he needed a fresh start. He found work at a lumber yard and lived alone in a small apartment outside Seattle. He was never seen with a child. He never mentioned Thomas. He acted like his son had never existed. In 1995, the FBI quietly closed their portion of the investigation. The case was officially inactive. The Franklin County Sheriff's Department had only one detective assigned to their inactive missing persons cases, a position funded by a grant that was not renewed in 2012. Thomas Cross was officially forgotten by law enforcement, but not by Diana. Every birthday, she baked a cake. Every Christmas, she hung a stocking. Every October 14th, she sat on the porch and watched the street, waiting for her son to come home. In 1998, Diana received a letter from a psychic in California who claimed to know where Thomas was. Diana paid $300 for a reading. The psychic described a rural area with mountains and pine trees. Diana drove 3 hours to a rural part of West Virginia based on the psychic's directions. She spent a week knocking on doors and showing Thomas's photograph. She found nothing. In 2002, a private investigator Diana hired reported a possible sighting in Oregon. A boy matching Thomas's description had been seen with a man who fit Richard Cross's profile. Diana flew to Oregon. She spent 3 weeks on the ground, distributing flyers, interviewing locals, and working with the investigator. Nothing. In 2008, a man contacted Diana and claimed to be her son. He was 26 years old and had been adopted as a child. Diana met with him. She bought a DNA test. It was not a match. She was disappointed, but not shattered. She had been disappointed too many times to break. By 2010, Diana had spent over $50,000 on private investigators, psychics, and travel expenses. She had exhausted her savings. She had exhausted herself. In 2015, a documentary filmmaker reached out to Diana about featuring Thomas's case in a missing persons series. Diana agreed to participate. The segment aired on a national cable network in 2016. Diana hoped it would generate fresh leads. It generated over 100 calls, but not one led anywhere. She stopped hoping for leads in 2020. She stopped hoping for anything at all. She just waited. She didn't know what she was waiting for anymore. It had been 30 years. She was 65 years old. She had spent more of her life without Thomas than with him, but she still kept the light on. The Seattle Police Department received Thomas Cross at 3:47 p.m. on August 3, 2026. Desk Sergeant Mitchell Rourke had been on the force for 22 years. He had seen everything: drunks, domestic disputes, drug busts, stolen cars. He had never seen a man walk in and claim to be a child who disappeared 3 decades ago. Everything about him seemed off, Rourke later told investigators. He looked terrified, not like a criminal afraid of getting caught, like someone who expected to be attacked at any second. He kept glancing at the doors, at the windows, like he was waiting for someone to come through them. Rourke noticed the man's hands. They were calloused, scarred, the hands of someone who had spent years working with wood and tools. His clothes were worn but clean. His hair was long and tangled. He had a quiet voice, soft and cautious, as if he was not used to speaking. When Thomas spoke his name, Rourke's training kicked in. He did not dismiss it. He pulled up NCIC records and found the cold case file. The missing child from Ohio matched the man standing before him. The age-progressed photo from the FBI archives looked almost identical to the face he was seeing. Rourke called the Franklin County Sheriff's Department in Ohio. He spoke to a detective who had been on the force for 20 years and knew the case by reputation. "I have a man claiming to be Thomas Cross," Rourke said. "I think you need to call the FBI." The detective on the other end of the line went silent. Thomas Cross. The kid from the 1990 abduction? "Yes, sir. I have him sitting in my station right now. He's asking for protection." The detective had only 3 words. No way in hell. The FBI's Seattle office responded within 2 hours. Evidence response team agents arrived and took Thomas into a private interview room. They swabbed his cheek for DNA and told him it would take 24 hours to process the match. They asked questions. Hundreds of questions. Thomas Cross began to speak. He described the day his father took him, October 14th, 1990. He was playing with his trucks in the front yard. A green pickup truck pulled up. His father was driving. He had not seen his father in almost 2 years. He was scared. "I remembered what happened before," Thomas told investigators. "When Dad would get mad, he would scream and break things. I didn't want to go. He grabbed me, picked me up. I tried to scream, but he put his hand over my mouth. He threw me in the back of the truck and told me if I made any noise, he would hurt my mother." Thomas did not scream. He did not cry. He lay in the bed of the pickup, hidden beneath a tarp, and watched his backyard disappear. His red bicycle was the last thing he saw, lying on the ground, one wheel still spinning. He remembered the tarp, the smell of oil and dust, the rough texture against his face. He remembered the sound of the engine and the feeling of the road vibrating through the metal bed. He had no idea where they were going. He was too scared to ask. Thomas described the drive. Hours and hours. He remembered crossing a state line, then another. He fell asleep and woke up to darkness. His father had driven him to a cabin in the Alaskan wilderness. No neighbors, no towns, just trees and snow and silence. From that night on, I wasn't Thomas Cross anymore, Thomas said. He told me my name was Mark Evans. He forged papers. He had someone in the city who made documents. He gave me a new birthday, a new identity. He said if I ever told anyone my real name, the government would arrest me and send me to prison. He said my mother didn't want me. He said she gave me away. He said she abandoned me. If for 36 years, Thomas Cross believed his mother had rejected him. He believed he was unwanted. He believed the world outside the cabin was dangerous, that police would hunt him, that he would die in a cell. He had no friends, no teachers, no doctors, no television, no internet. His father told him the world had collapsed, that everyone died, that only they survived. He was the only person Thomas ever spoke to, for 36 years. Thomas had an occasional visitor, a man who brought supplies and took money from his father. He knew the visitor's name only as Frank. Frank never spoke to him. Frank never looked him in the eye. Frank would drop off boxes of canned food, ammunition, and gasoline, and leave. Thomas's father taught him to hunt, to fish, to chop wood, to maintain the cabin. He taught Thomas to fear the outside world. He taught Thomas that the only safe place was that cabin in the Alaskan wilderness. Every day was the same, Thomas said. Wake up, chop wood, hunt, eat, read, sleep. My father had a stack of old books. I read them over and over. I memorized them. I knew the pages by heart. When we ran out of books, he taught me to read the Bible. I read it 100 times. It was the only thing we had. Thomas described the winters. The snow piled up so high that he could not leave the cabin for weeks. The cold seeped through the walls. The wood stove kept them alive. He learned to build fires by the time he was 10. He learned to shoot a rifle at 12. When I was old enough to ask questions, my father said I didn't need to know the answers, Thomas said. He said I was safe. He said I was protected. He said the outside world was dead. I asked about my mother once. He told me she didn't want me. He said she gave me away. He said she never loved me. Thomas learned to stop asking questions. He learned to survive. He learned to live in silence. Thomas described his father's death, July 17th, 2026. Richard Cross was 73 years old. He had been slowing down for years, unable to hunt or chop wood. Thomas had been caring for him. He made meals, cleaned the cabin, and kept the fire going. On that morning, Richard complained of chest pain. He lay down on his cot and closed his eyes. Thomas checked on him an hour later. He was not breathing. I didn't know what to do, Thomas said. I couldn't call anyone. There was no phone. I didn't know how to bury him. So I just left him there. I sat in the corner and stared at the wall. I stayed like that for 3 days. I was waiting for him to wake up. He didn't wake up. When the realization finally set in, Thomas began searching the cabin. He had lived there his entire life. He knew every inch of the property. But he had never been allowed to open his father's personal belongings. He had never been allowed to look inside the iron box. After my father died, I started opening things, Thomas said. I opened drawers, closets, boxes. I didn't know what I was looking for. I just wanted to know something. Anything. I wanted to know who I was. He found the iron box under the floorboards. It was wrapped in oilcloth and secured with a padlock. Thomas had seen his father unlock it a few times. He knew where the key was hidden. He opened the box. Inside were newspaper clippings from 1990 and 1991. Photographs of Diana Cross crying in front of news cameras, missing posters with Thomas's face. A court order restricting Richard Cross from any contact with his son. And a letter. The letter was written by Richard Cross in 1990, shortly after the abduction. It read, "If anyone finds this after I'm gone, I'll be dead. The boy is mine. He belongs to me. His mother is unfit. The courts are corrupt. Thomas will never know what happened. He will live with me until I say otherwise. I am his only parent. I am his only family. The world outside cannot be trusted. I will protect him." Thomas had never seen the letter. He had found the clippings, but had not looked through the entire box before he fled. He had been too shaken, too desperate to escape. He stared at the photograph of Diana Cross, a woman with wet eyes, holding his photograph, standing at a press conference. He read a quote from her. "I will never give up. I will wait my entire life. Thomas will come home." Everything his father had told him was a lie. His mother had not abandoned him. She had searched for him. She had waited for him. She had never stopped loving him. Thomas Cross sat on the floor of the cabin and wept. He wept for the life he had lost. He wept for the mother he had never known. He wept for his father, who had taken everything from him. He gathered the clippings and stuffed them in his pocket. He took the money his father had hidden in a coffee tin. He took a change of clothes and a jacket. He left the cabin on July 20th, 2026. He did not look back. He walked away from the property without closing the front door. He walked into the forest, following a trail he had memorized from childhood. He walked until he reached the town of Craig, Alaska. He walked into a diner and ordered a burger. The waitress asked where he came from. "Far away," Thomas said. "Very far away." He asked about bus stations. She pointed to the highway. He bought a ticket for the first bus leaving town. He rode to Juneau and boarded a ferry to the mainland. He kept the clippings in his pocket, pressed against his chest. 10 days after leaving the cabin, Thomas Cross walked into a Seattle police station and told a desk sergeant his real name. The FBI agents who interviewed Thomas asked him about his journey. He described the bus ride, the ferry, the hours of travel. He described feeling terrified and free at the same time. He described watching the world through windows, seeing cities and highways and crowds of strangers. "I never knew there were so many people," Thomas said. "I thought everyone was dead." The agents looked at each other. They had seen many things in their careers. They had never seen anything like this. Thomas Cross had been kept in a state of deliberate psychological imprisonment. His father had isolated him, controlled him, and convinced him the outside world was a dangerous place full of enemies. Thomas believed he had no one to turn to. He believed his mother did not want him. He believed the police would arrest him on sight. He had lived in fear for 36 years. Now his father was dead. Now he was free. The FBI launched an investigation into the cabin site. Search teams flew to Alaska to locate the property. They found it within 3 days, guided by Thomas's descriptions. A small, weathered cabin deep in the Tongass National Forest. The property had no electricity, no phone lines, no running water. A hand-pumped well and a wood stove were the only utilities. Inside, investigators found Richard Cross's body. He had died in his sleep, apparently from a heart attack. His death certificate was dated July 17th, 2026. There was no foul play. They found Thomas's room, a small space with a cot, a single shelf of old paperback books, and a window facing the mountains. The walls were covered in Thomas's drawings. Birds, trees, the sky. No people. Never people. They found the iron box. Thomas had described it exactly. Under the floorboards in the cabin's main room. Inside were the newspaper clippings, the missing posters, the court order, and the letter. The FBI contacted the man Thomas knew as Frank. His real name was Gerald Portman, an old friend of Richard Cross's from the steel plant. Portman had been supplying the cabin for decades. He had visited twice a year, dropping off food and supplies, never speaking to Thomas. He claimed he never knew about the abduction. The kid always seemed happy, Portman told investigators. Richard said the mother was dead. I believed him. Why would I question it? He paid me well to mind my own business. Portman was not charged with kidnapping, but he faced federal charges for aiding in the concealment of a missing person. He was 78 years old and claimed he was just trying to help a friend. Thomas Cross sat in a Seattle hotel room under police protection and processed the last 2 weeks of his life. His father was dead. The woman who raised him had lied to him for 3 decades. His mother had spent 36 years praying for a son who was told she had abandoned him. He asked the FBI agent a question. Did she ever stop looking? The agent said no. She never stopped. Thomas wept. At 8:00 a.m. on August 4, 2026, the FBI lab called with the DNA results. The sample from the man calling himself Mark Evans matched the 1990 file from the missing Ohio boy. No doubt. A 99. 9% confirmation. Thomas Cross was alive. Investigators alerted Diana Cross's attorney at 9:15 a.m. The sheriff's department was dispatched to her home at 10:30 a.m. She was told her son had been found alive in Seattle. Diana Cross dropped to her knees in her kitchen. She placed her hands on the floor. She wept for 20 minutes without making a sound. The investigators asked if she wanted to speak to him. She said yes. The FBI arranged for Diana to speak to Thomas over a video call. She waited in her living room, surrounded by Thomas's old toys, his childhood photographs, his red bicycle still leaning against the garage wall. She had kept it all. She had never let it go. The screen flickered. A man appeared. He looked older, aged by a hard life. But his eyes were the same. She had memorized those eyes. She had seen them in her dreams. "Thomas," she whispered. "Yes, Mom," he said. Diana reached for the screen. She pressed her fingers against the glass. She did not care that he was thousands of miles away. She only cared that he was there. "You came back," she said. "I came back," he said. "I found the papers. I found your picture. I found out you never stopped looking." Diana cried. Thomas cried. They talked for hours. He told her everything, the cabin, the lies, the isolation. She told him everything, the searches, the vigils, the sleepless nights. "Did you ever leave the house?" Thomas asked. "Did you ever think about moving?" "Never," Diana said. "You were coming home. I knew you were coming home." The FBI arranged for Thomas to fly to Ohio. They wanted him to walk into the Franklin County Sheriff's Department and officially close the case file. They wanted him to see his home again. Thomas Cross landed in Columbus on August 8, 2026. Police escorted him to his childhood home. He had not seen the house since he was 8 years old. He had no memories of it. Diana was waiting on the porch, the same porch she had stood on in October 1990, calling his name into the empty yard. She wore a blue dress and held a single white flower. Thomas walked up the driveway. He saw the house, the yard, the street where he had played. He saw the red bicycle leaning against the garage. His bicycle, still there, still waiting. He walked to the porch. He looked at his mother. He reached out and took her hand. "Hello, Mom," he said. Diana Cross looked at her son. The boy she had lost had become a man, a stranger. But he was her stranger. He had come home. "I knew you would come back," she said. The moment was captured by local news crews. The story went national within hours. A headline flashed across CNN, Fox, and BBC. "Missing Ohio boy found alive after 36 years." Thomas Cross moved back to Ohio. He and his mother sat in her kitchen and told stories. She showed him photo albums, videos, school projects. She showed him the life he had missed. It took Thomas months to adjust. He had to learn to use a phone. He had to learn to trust strangers. He had to learn that police officers were not going to arrest him. He had to learn that his father had been wrong about everything. But he had his mother. He had a home. He had a name that was finally his own. Diana Cross celebrated her 72nd birthday with Thomas by her side. She baked a blueberry cake, his favorite. She put candles on it. She asked him to make a wish. "I already got my wish," Thomas said. "I came home." The Franklin County Sheriff's Department closed the case on September 15, 2026. They held a small ceremony and presented Thomas with a copy of the original missing poster. He framed it and hung it in his new apartment. "Every time I look at it, I remember who I was," Thomas said, "and who I am now." This story is a fictional narrative inspired by real human experiences, reunions, and the enduring strength of family bonds. It was created for entertainment and reflection. The characters, names, locations, and events are products of the author's imagination. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or actual events is purely coincidental. Archive 26 presents these stories to honor the resilience of those who wait and the hope that never fades. This concludes the case of Thomas Cross. 36 years is a long time to wait. But Diana Cross proved that a mother's hope can outlast any obstacle. She kept the lights on. She kept the room ready. She kept the red bicycle waiting. And one day, her son walked through the door. Thank you for listening to this story. If it moved you, if it made you think about the power of family, please share your thoughts in the comments. We read every single one. If you found this investigation compelling, leave a like. It helps others discover these stories. And if you haven't already, consider subscribing to Archive 26 for more cases that remind us why we never stop looking. Until the next case.